President Lee Jae Myung is set to hold a summit with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni today. With Meloni's visit to Korea marking the first by an Italian PM in nearly 2 decades, the two leaders will be seeking to broaden Seoul-Rome cooperation. We turn to Professor Andrew Millard for more this morning. Good morning, Professor Millard.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
First, let's start with the upcoming Meloni summit. Now, this will be their second face-to-face. What do you think will be on the agenda to begin with?
So you're right. So as you just mentioned, this is really the first Italy-Korea summit in almost 2 decades, so in 19 years. So for that reason, this is quite a significant summit. I don't think this is going to be as big a summit as the previous meeting that Lee had in China with Xi and things like that. But it's still going to be several things on the agenda. So there's going to be some trade issues, both Italy and Korea looking to boost their trade cooperation, also supply chain resilience. As we know, a couple of years ago, there was also the mutual cultural exchange year from 2024 to 2025. So I'm pretty sure they'll also be discussing cultural exchanges, so people-to-people exchanges. As we know, in a few weeks' time, there's going to be the Winter Olympics held in Italy. So I think culture will also be a big part of the agenda. However, I think right now, just based on the timing, really security issues are going to be very high on this agenda. So for Prime Minister Meloni, she's going to be looking at what are the issues in Northeast Asia between China, South Korea, Japan, also the US, and vice versa. For President Lee, this is really a great time to really sit down with Prime Minister Meloni and discuss what is really happening between the EU and the US in Greenland with these possible new trade war between the EU and US. This could have very big implications also for South Korea-EU relations as well.
So talks on regional security will likely top the agenda. Now, you mentioned supply chain resilience, Professor Miller. There's a particular focus on whether the two sides will issue a joint agreement on supply chain cooperation. The question is, how closely can South Korea and Italy actually work together on supply chains?
So actually, if you look over the past few years, South Korea and Italy have been sort of rebuilding and really strengthening their relationship just in general, so for trade. So back in 2018, there was the strategic dialogue, the strategic partnership which they enacted. Back in 2023, there was also an MOU for industrial cooperation agenda. Last year, there was also the Italy-South Korea Business Forum, where, depending on different reports, at least more than 100 companies from both Italy and Korea met in Seoul. So that was in September. So there's definitely been a lot of progress, a lot of action, a lot of MOUs, discussions between Italy and Korea over the past few years. So they are really looking to build a lot more cooperation. When it comes to supply chain, however, we have to remember this isn't just about focusing on one country. Both Italy and South Korea, they're going around looking for different ways that they can secure their supply chains. So for Italy, we see Prime Minister Meloni on this trip. She's also been to Oman. She's been to Japan. We've seen recently President Lee from South Korea also going to China, also going to Japan. So they're both looking for different ways. But I think definitely for South Korea, Italy, areas such as green technology, defense, aerospace, AI technologies, these are certain areas where there is a lot of complementary industries between the two countries. So there could be potential action there.
I see. Professor Miller, let's shift our attention to over in Europe. Calls are growing for the European Union to activate its Anti-Coercion Instrument in response to the growing trade threat by the Trump administration. Can you explain what the ACI is and whether it can actually put any real pressure on the U.S.?
So the ACI, so the Anti-Coercion Instrument, this is actually a relatively new instrument from the European Union. It was only adopted in late 2023. So far, it has never been actually initiated. So there was a time in 2024, something to do with China and electric vehicles. But at that point, it was actually blocked by Germany. But effectively, the ACI is where if the EU considers that a third country outside of the EU has some sort of economic threat or economic coercion against the EU, then the European Commission can decide, we want to take action against this country. They send it to the European Union Council. The Council then decides by what we call qualified majority voting, whether to take action or not. Now, if they decide to take action, which basically requires all of the EU member states to work together, then potentially they could increase tariff barriers, they could have restriction on imports or exports. So there are certain sort of ways that they can counter this coercion. If it doesn't happen, though, the European Commission still has the power to increase tariffs and so on anyway.
Well, I do have to ask you, will the ACI be effective? I mean, if not, what other options do European countries have to counter Trump's, ongoing ambitions for Greenland?
So again, the ACI, it could be very effective, but what the EU really needs for the ACI, and even without it, it requires unity. It requires all of the EU member states to stand together in solidarity to have a very coordinated response against these countries. So right now we can see with Greenland, there really is a very big threat. And right now it's against 8 members of Europe, not all the European Union. So really there is a very strong threat against them, but it requires all 27 members of the EU to stand together to very strongly criticize the US and say, no, you cannot do this, because as Kaja Kallas, who is the EU High Representative, she just said, right now, China and Russia, they're having a field day because what is happening now, if we see divides happening within the European Union, this makes the EU very weak. So the EU member states, they must stay together. That's the most important point.
Unity appears to be the core message for now. Thank you, Professor Millard, for your time and your insight as always. You have a wonderful day.
Okay, thank you. You too.